Vampire. We might be familiar with the elegant, stylish vampires we see on screen today, but the original legends were far darker. The earliest versions of vampires, called Upir or Upir, came from Slavic folklore in Eastern Europe in the 11th century. And trust me, these weren't the charming Draculas we know now. People feared them as actual corpses that could crawl out of their graves and attack the living. Basically, you could think of them as Europe's first zombies. According to the myth, they were the restless dead who returned to feed on humans, usually family members. Villagers described them as bloated or discolored, sometimes with blood around the mouth. The vampire myth likely grew from misunderstandings of decomposition. Bodies naturally swell, change color, and leak fluids. Natural phenomena like gas buildup in a corpse, causing it to sigh or purge fluid, and the appearance of longer hair and fingernails as skin recedes led to the belief that the dead could rise and harm the living. But who knows? Maybe one guy actually did climb out of his grave and wander around back then. Anyway, these myths eventually inspired movies like Dracula and Nosferatu, turning vampires into stylish, charismatic, and dangerously charming creatures. A far cry from the rot-smelling, zombie-like corpses of the original myths. Bram Stoker even borrowed Vlad the Impaler's name for his novel, adding a touch of historical flair, though Vlad himself was never actually part of the real folklore. Mummy. Long before Hollywood wrapped people in toilet paper and called it horror, the real world already had a deep fear of disturbing the dead, especially in ancient Egypt. Mummies weren't monsters at first. They were sacred, carefully preserved bodies meant to rest forever. Egyptians believed the soul needed the body intact to pass into the afterlife, so disturbing a tomb was basically the ultimate violation. So where did the killer mummy myth come from? It actually starts in the 1800s, during the era of European explorers raiding tombs and shipping mummies back home like souvenirs. Because for centuries, tombs were seen as treasure chests, stuffed with gold, jewelry, and valuables. And everyone, from thieves to explorers, wanted a piece of it. And every time something went wrong, a sickness, an accident, a death, people blamed it on the curse of the pharaohs. The idea exploded when newspapers sensationalized the discovery of King Tut's tomb in 1922. When several people linked to the dig died unexpectedly, journalists claimed a supernatural curse was finally striking back. In reality, most deaths had normal causes: infections, illness, or natural accidents. But the myth was too spooky to resist. Hollywood grabbed the idea and turned it into the classic horror image: a bandage-wrapped corpse, slowly rising from its sarcophagus to hunt down anyone who disturbed its eternal rest. Movies like The Mummy transformed ancient religious beliefs into a full-blown monster genre, and that's how The Mummy stepped out of history and straight into horror legend. Werewolf. Werewolves, also known as lycanthropes, have haunted European folklore for centuries, with tales going back as far as ancient Greece. Let's forget the Hollywood version with abs, leather jackets, and perfectly groomed fur. The original werewolves were closer to cursed villagers than the powerful, heroic figures we see in modern films. According to early legends, a werewolf wasn't born, but made, usually through a curse, a pact with dark forces, or punishment from the gods. In some stories, people transformed by wearing a wolf's skin or drinking rainwater from a wolf's footprint. In others, the transformation was a divine punishment for cannibalism or brutality. These early werewolves weren't majestic creatures under the moonlight. They were described as violent, ravenous, and barely human, more like feral beasts than cursed heroes. Villagers believed a werewolf could be recognized even in human form by certain traits: unibrows, hairy palms, long nails, or an unnaturally hungry appetite. Eventually, werewolves found their way into modern pop culture. From the classic horror of the Wolfman to the romantic fan-favorite shapeshifters of Twilight, the creature evolved from a cursed monster into everything from tragic anti-heroes to supernatural icons. Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster isn't pulled from ancient folklore like vampires or werewolves, but it is deeply rooted in real scientific fears and myths of the early 1800s. Back then, Europe was obsessed with a new and terrifying idea: reanimation. Scientists had discovered electricity could make dead muscles twitch, and that blew everyone's mind. The most famous experiment came from Luigi Galvani and later Giovanni Aldini, who electrified animal corpses and even human ones. Reports claimed that dead bodies opened their eyes, raised their arms, or twitched violently when shocked with electrodes. To people at the time, this wasn't science, it was sorcery. Mary Shelley, only 18 years old, absorbed all of this. In 1816, she wrote Frankenstein, inspired by the fear that humans were getting too close to playing God. Her creature wasn't meant to be a stitched-together zombie. In the original story, he's smart, emotional, and painfully aware that he was created without ever choosing to live. Hollywood later turned him into the iconic flat-headed, bolt-neck monster we know today. But the real myth behind Frankenstein comes from a cultural panic that science was advancing too fast, blurring the line between life and death. Krampus. Krampus comes straight out of Alpine folklore, mainly Austria, Germany, and surrounding regions, and he's basically the anti-Santa. While St. Nicholas rewards good kids with gifts, Krampus follows behind him to punish the bad ones. According to the myth, Krampus is a horned, goat-like creature covered in fur, with cloven hooves, a long tongue, and chains that rattle as he walks. His job? Drag naughty children into his sack, whip them with birch sticks, or, in older, darker stories, carry them away entirely. So where did this nightmare come from? Krampus is believed to be a survival of pre-Christian Alpine traditions, possibly tied to old pagan winter spirits meant to scare off darkness and evil of the cold months. When Christianity spread through Europe, instead of erasing the old legends, it merged with them. That's how we ended up with a Christmas season that weirdly includes both a saint and a demon. For centuries, people celebrated Krampusnacht, Krampus Night, where Krampus roamed the streets on December 5th, rattling chains, scaring kids, and causing mischief. It was basically Europe's original horror parade. Hollywood later turned Krampus into a full-blown movie monster, especially with the 2015 film Krampus, which pushed the legend into international pop culture. Now he's less a folklore figure and more a holiday horror icon. Zombie. Zombies might feel like a modern horror staple thanks to movies like The Walking Dead or World War Z, but their roots go way deeper, all the way to Haitian Vodou and European folklore. In Haitian legend, a zombie was a dead person brought back to life through magic or sorcery. Unlike movie zombies, they weren't flesh-eating monsters. They were often controlled by a bokor, sorcerer, and used as laborers or servants, basically magical slaves. European folklore also had revenants, corpses that returned from the grave to harm the living. Villagers blamed them for sudden deaths, disease, or unexplained misfortune. Sometimes all it took was a natural misunderstanding, like a body bloating in the grave or gas forcing fluids out, to spark stories of the undead walking again. Hollywood later took these legends and turned them into what we know today: mindless, flesh-eating hordes. Mark Forster's World War Z made zombies the ultimate symbol of fear, chaos, and societal collapse, far from the controlled undead of folklore. Basically, the undead got an upgrade, from mystical slaves to monsters we can't stop running from on screen. Siren. Sirens come from ancient Greek mythology, first appearing around the 8th century BCE. They weren't the beautiful mermaids we often see today. Originally, sirens were half-bird, half-woman creatures who lived on rocky islands and lured sailors to their doom with their irresistible songs. According to the myth, sailors who heard a siren's song couldn't resist steering their ships toward the rocks, often causing shipwrecks and death. Some stories describe them as cunning tricksters, while others depict them as outright dangerous predators. Their allure and threat were two sides of the same coin, enchanting enough to draw sailors in, lethal enough to destroy them. The siren myth likely grew from sailors' encounters with the unknown at sea. Rough waters, dangerous reefs, and even misidentified sea creatures like manatees or dolphins could spark tales of supernatural beings singing from the rocks. For example, during his 1493 voyage, Christopher Columbus reported seeing 3 mermaids rising from the sea, but historians now agree he most likely saw manatees, not mythical women. Their shape and faces fooled him, but who knows? Maybe there really was some mysterious creature haunting the seas back then. Anyway, these myths eventually inspired movies like Pirates of the Caribbean and Siren, turning sirens into seductive, terrifying, and sometimes flesh-eating monsters, a far cry from the beautiful mermaids we know from Disney.